Good morning. My name is Ray. I'm with Team S.t.e.a.m. This morning I'm here at Flash Industrial Painting, and it's early morning. It's still dark outside. Yesterday I went ahead and got this all completely ready for bodywork. Spent the bulk of the morning painstakingly getting all of the rest of that stripper off of here and wiping it down with thinner, and then the afternoon sanding everything down completely, getting all the remnants of all the old paint job off. This truck is 100% bald and ready to go. So today I'm going to start on the bodywork and hopefully get the bodywork done and in primer, so I can also hopefully get the red on it today. We'll see how that goes, but I'm trying to get the red on it today. Now, before we start any actual bodywork, the first thing you want to do when you have a pickup or a vehicle or a piece of metal or anything that's been mangled in any way is you want to run your hands over it, maybe not even while you're looking at it, but run your hands over it and see if you can feel any high spots, because those will come right through your bodywork. So what you want to do is feel for those, and if you find them, and I've found quite a few and they're super typical, get your shrinking hammer or your welding slag hammer, same thing, and beat those high spots back in and shrink the metal, and then you can do your body work without that poking through. This is an auto body shrinking hammer. First one I've ever bought my whole career. I bought it within the last year. And this is a welding slag hammer. When you create slag, you use this to chip it off. I use this for auto body. It needs sharpened at the moment, but I use it for auto body and for dislodging large scale rust. And I have a couple of these slag hammers. Now, they don't really cost much at all, and they do the exact same job as this guy does. So I've been using these for years. And what you want to do is you want to find your high spots, and there's one right there that runs this way, and you want to shrink those up. And when you do that, you create a bunch of tiny little dents, and then that actually shrinks the surface of the metal up. Each one of those dents takes up its own little space, and it shrinks up that metal. Now, you don't want to just go beating on a panel willy-nilly all the time. I got away with it here because of the rigidity of this particular area, but the fact is, a lot of times you want to have a device behind it. You want to have a plate or something, some sort of backer behind it, to make sure that you're not causing too big of a dent. And that's where these come in. This is just a heavy piece of steel. This is the one I use the most often. This is just for different curvatures and situations. Same with this. Same with this. This is the one I use the second most often. You know, and here's another one. But if you have a backer like that, and if I were to put one on the back of where I was just beating, it would be this one, because it's got that curvature I'd want to work with. And that is almost crucial. On this particular bend, in that particular spot, it's not, but most times it is. And if you want a demonstration right there at your own home on how that works, how that shrinks that metal up, get a napkin or a paper towel or a Kleenex or something like that. Set it on the counter or set it on a cushion, and then put even just one divot in it. But before you do, make an outline of the outside of it. Then as soon as you put that divot, and you don't have to go deep at all, even just one divot, you'll start to see your outside outline grow. The space between your material, your napkin or whatever, and the outside line, that gap will grow bigger and bigger as you push that down. Now imagine numerous ones of those. That's going to really bring in that outside. That's how you shrink the metal. The metal actually shrinks, and those external dents or outies or whatever you want to call them, those swollen spots will go away. You can get bulged and swollen metal to shrink up and behave. And when you beat on it, you actually affect the metallurgy of it, and it will harden. The steel will go ahead and harden with each time that you bend it. And that's why you can't take a piece of steel like this and kink it over and then straighten it back out again completely. You'll always see that bend because it actually hardened in that spot. So when you shrink something and you do it correctly, you harden it enough to where if it's a bulbous spot that keeps popping out, it'll eventually stop popping out because it'll become rigid and it'll become shrunken, and you will have done your job. And on this particular one, somebody put aftermarket mirrors on this truck, and they bolted it there, and there on both sides. And there's some bolts there, and all of them, they weren't bolts, they were just lagged right into the side. And so these are swollen areas. They're actually coming out. On the other side, it's even worse. These I won't worry about because the bracket that holds the mirror is going to totally cover it. But these I do. I have to actually get my shrinking hammer around these. And these have been hardened. When they got pulled out initially by that lag screw, they had hardened them. And so it's difficult. You actually have to knock all this in just a little bit. So this is all going to be dented in just a little bit. And then I'll put a fiberglass patch on it, 2 little patches, and then I'll go ahead and do my body work over that. The fiberglass patch guarantees that the outline of that is never ever going to come visit this this paint job again. All right, you might not be able to see it well, but I've got a fiberglass patch over this. Now I beat it back in a little ways, and then I put a fiberglass patch on it. Now I'm going to sand that down a little bit, and then cover it all with bodywork. And then you'll never ever ever see these holes or hear from them again. And that's what I did on the others as well. Well, it's time to get into some of this body work. You want to ride along? Let's do it. Now what I'm doing is I've got this board, it's about a 12-inch board, and it's got 40 grit on it. And what you'll see me do, a lot of this is, a lot of the footage that you see is time-lapse footage, where you just see me going fast, and occasionally you'll see me stop what I'm doing and use one of these blow tips. Well, what I'm doing is I'm going across this just enough to get it clogged up. Anything beyond that, and you're sanding unevenly, because the middle part that's clogged up is no longer sanding, and the parts that aren't are still sanding. So now you're not sanding evenly, and you're just grinding it in there further and further. So what you see me do time and time again on that time-lapse footage is you'll see me getting this a little bit, and then you'll see me blowing it off, because this blow tip right here blows it all out of there. And then you can start over with a fresh piece, and then fill it up and blow it out, fill it up and blow it out. That's what you keep seeing me do. So we're getting some of this body work banged out. We're just kind of getting it a little bit at a time as we go, just making from one panel right to the next panel, and finishing it as we go. Now, to better understand the difficulties with stripping the paint completely off of something and then finding every little tiny dent and ding, that gets difficult. Oftentimes the tiny dings that will show up in paint are too tiny sometimes to feel with your hand even. Especially if you're going over it anywhere near quick. You have to go over it so meticulously. And after a while, that gets pretty tedious. And so here's the marking system that I use for when I do find dents, but you don't want to try and remember where they all are on this barren, identical silver surface. Here's what I do. See on this fender, see that circle? That represents roughly the size of dent. That's a medium dent. That's more of a medium dent. That's a bigger dent. That dent is actually, so that's why the bigger circle. And these just little dings, but I put bigger marks on them, but not full circles, so I could see them easier. But they're not full circles, so they're just dings. That way I don't have to walk up with my mud in my hand and try and refeel all these to guess what's going on with them. See, there's a good size one. That's why the circle's big, and you can see where the old dent was. I've beat most of that back with a shrinking hammer, but it still needs gone over. And then like over here on the hood, this is more of a little crease, and so is this. This is more of a crease. That's why it's just a straight line. That's a good sized dent. That's why the big circle. just a small ding. That's why the smaller circle. And just a couple of little chops. And that's why the little lines in it. And there's another one there. And that's how I can interpret what I'm dealing with as I walk up with mud. So I don't put a giant patch and 4 inches of mud on that when all it needs is just a little $half-dollar sized, you know, repair. And where you put a $half-dollar sized repair on there, you'll do it 25 times. So, you know, you got to know how much mud and where without walking up and trying to feel it all the time. So that's how I mark out a bare steel project and other projects, not just bare steel, for bodywork. So it's not infrequent that I run into these holes in cabs and roofs and different panels on vehicles, semis and domestic vehicles alike, where there used to be an antenna or whatever the reason is for there to be a hole. And what you do is you use your shrinking hammer and you beat that back in about a 1/16 of an inch or so, cover it with a single layer of fiberglass, and then you're free to just do your body work right over the top of it, which I'm about to do right now. And it'll end up looking like that with the little fiberglass patch on it. Then I'll go ahead and sand that and do body work over the top of it. Now the body work's done. Got it in primer yesterday.